Good evening, guys. Wellness Wednesday again, and I want to share with you today about cravings and talking about cravings and things that you can do to actually manage cravings, because I know cravings is one of those things that can actually be really frustrating, and often it's something we feel like we don't have any control over. So we could be craving sweet food, carby food, salty food, or even to the point where you're eating really well, and all of a sudden you have a massive binge, or you just you can fall completely off the wagon. And so cravings and feeling almost like you don't have control over what you're eating, and you're almost possessed is a lot what I hear with people. And this battle, and there's a constant battle that happens, and then when something like this happens and we do fall off the wagon, we then beat ourselves up. So I just want to share with you guys today the biochemical aspects of cravings and why it's actually not just about having self-control. And I also then want to share about the emotional aspect of that. So to begin with, the odds are actually stacked against us when we're actually looking at food and the way that food is today. And there's so much modified, very highly processed food. The way that this food is designed is actually stacked against us, because there's this sweet spot when food manufacturers design food for it to be this perfect balance between it's called the Bliss Point, between fat, sugar, and protein, and particularly fat and sugar. And the sweet spot is it doesn't feel too fatty, it doesn't feel too sweet, but it's addictive. And sometimes there's also things added to food to make it more addictive, and there's addictive aspects to that, but it's called the Bliss Point. And so food is designed for us to continually consume, to not have a stop button, for us to want more and not have control over it. And that Bliss Point plays a big role in that. And that's this combination of fat and sugar. And it's designed for us to be addictive. So that's one thing I just want to acknowledge. The other thing is that with the abundance of food, the way that our environment has changed so much compared to how we lived even 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, or a few hundred years ago, it's dramatically changed in the last 100 years, so that there is an abundance of food. It's not just plants and animals now, it's this food that's been made in a lab that has an impact on our biochemistry, because it's not actually how the body recognizes food, and there's a knock-on effect, like a ripple effect of that. So it's stacked against us to begin with. When we're talking about cravings and we're talking about not having self-control, and there's a lot of people that, and I still see this on social media, talking about calories in versus calories out. What a lot of bullshit. It's more than that. It's so much more complicated than that. Food, to begin with, is emotional. Food is a connector. Food has so much emotional history to it. We're rewarded with food. The first connection we have with our mother, is breastfeeding us through food, like that warm, nurturing aspect to it as well. And we need food as well to survive. So there's all these different levels and different layers to it. And so then when we're talking about cravings, we've got to look at all those different aspects and unpack it, and actually take off the layer and peel back the lid and peel back the layers of the onion and go, okay, what's going on with someone if you're having problems with, if you're craving, or you feel like you can't actually make the right decisions because you get to that point where you just will grab anything and eat, or you if it's around you, you don't feel like you can say no or resist it. And we'll talk about strategies to address that as well. I'm going to start with the biochemical, and the biochemical is really important. One of the biggest things that can drive, there's a few big things that can drive cravings, is irregulated blood sugar levels. And so it's a little bit like, we need to consume food. There's three types of macronutrients that we consume: fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Okay. And so carbohydrate all gets broken down to glucose, and it's just the way, the form in that it's eaten. However, it's not all equal when we consume it, because then there's other things mixed with it, and the way that it breaks down will affect the level of blood sugar in our blood. And what happens is, when there's too much sugar in our blood, our body needs to do something with it, because that high sugar can cause damage to the cells. And so we've got to store it, and we store it as fat. And so when we're looking at irregulated blood sugar levels, there's this roller coaster of high blood sugar levels, and then we have a drop because it gets high and then stored as fat, and it also burns quickly and doesn't last, and it's not sustainable. So I think of it like getting some heat in the fire, and then either keep putting kindling on the fire, or you put a big fat log. And there's a difference between the way that our body can learn to metabolize our fuel as well. And having blood sugar levels that are all, what we want is a nice, stable, like constant, not too, like it's still going to go up and down a little bit, but more constant, stable blood sugar levels, so that we then don't get cravings. We feel satiated. If we're also deficient in minerals, we'll also go craving foods, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the first thing we've got to address when we're having any sort of craving is blood sugar levels, and that's the first place I go. And so insulin resistance is one of the big drivers of craving carbohydrates or overeating and eating the wrong types of food. And if we eat food and then we have high blood sugar levels, and they will then drop, we'll then get more hungry and eat more food, and it gets constantly stored as fat. But insulin resistance insulin is a hormone, and insulin allows glucose to go into the cell, and it's a little bit like, imagine a gatekeeper knocking at the door and letting people into the party. Say, call it the bouncer. So the bouncer's like, yep, you're in, he's opening the door, letting the people into the club. But what happens is, sometimes the music is so loud in the club and the bouncer's on the inside, he can't quite hear. And so the knocking gets louder, and that's insulin going, let me in, let me in, let me in. Like, we've got to let glucose in. So the insulin's like the guy knocking on the door, the bouncer's got to hear it. They can't hear it. So you've got to knock louder. There's a few analogies like that I use. So then we make more insulin. Our body isn't getting the energy it needs, so we'll crave more because we're not getting it in, and our body then doesn't know what to do with it, so we'll store it as fat. And there's this cycle that then happens. So we've got to get better at utilizing our fuel, and it's that kindling versus log explanation. And so the way that we make energy in the cell is really important. And a lot of that is dependent on a lot of different vitamins and minerals. And if we're deficient in, say, for example, B vitamins, we sometimes won't make energy correctly. There's lots of different aspects to this. Magnesium is another big one. So deficiencies, cravings will tell us what's going on, what you're craving as well, whether it's salty or sweet. And it can also be deficiencies. It can be insulin resistance. And it can also sometimes, like if you're craving salty food, it can be the adrenals needing, like the stress. Adrenals are the little glands that sit on top of our kidneys and produce cortisol and adrenaline. And they can be a bit overworked, and they do like a bit of salt. And so sometimes when we are feeling very stressed, sometimes people will crave salty foods, and that is also a sign that our adrenals need a little bit of extra support. When we're in that fight or flight mode, we've got cortisol like pulsing through our veins. We need quick energy, because cortisol and adrenaline is designed to allow us to act quickly, to run from the tiger or the bear. And that's still how our brains work, even though that for most of the part, 99.99% of the time isn't the case. We don't have to get out of an emergency situation. And so, but our body will still act the same. And that response is designed to give us quick energy. So we will make glucose. Our body will either, it will convert it from glycogen in the liver, or it will, and it will happen quickly, but then we'll get cravings. If it keeps going, we need food, because we need that extra energy. And this is when we have this long-term chronic response. So we want quick energy. And so our body is designed biologically to go for the quickest, easiest thing. So you can see that if we are in a stressed response, or we're not getting in what we need, and so the processes are not working the way they should, our body will just find a way to go, we need energy now, go get it. And so then you're fighting against this biochemical process in your body that's just trying to survive. And so it's in your best interest. It's just that what's available isn't actually going to benefit you, and it can make it worse, and it's a perpetual cycle. So first of all, becoming aware of that, retraining yourself as well, like on how to eat and what to eat. So there's this element of this consciousness and this unconsciousness, and we've got to look at both. Having enough protein in your diet, so making sure that you're getting in enough protein is really important. It keeps us satiated. Getting in good quality fats also keeps us satiated, and consuming the right type of carbohydrates, so aka plants, that aren't going to help, that are going to cause this roller coaster of blood sugar levels, which can then cause us to dip. Coffee can do this for a lot of people, but it will cause a blood sugar spike, and we'll have a drop. It will drop, and it can cause the blood sugar spike because it causes our cortisol levels to go up, and then we have a bit of a crash, and then we crave more coffee or more sugar or whatever. So there's a few elements to this, but really understanding that we need that quick energy often the time, and it's a biochemical process, and our body is just being smart and it's doing its job, right? So we've got to learn to eat in a way that's going to keep us satiated, that's going to put a low burn, like a log on the fire to burn, rather than quick energy. We've got to re-educate ourselves. We've got to make sure we're getting in enough protein. And that also depends on how much you're training. A general rule of thumb is 1 gram of protein. Now, this is not if you're hardcore training, but if you moderately exercise, 1 gram of protein per kilo of body weight is a really good rule of thumb. To say you weigh 70 kilos, probably about 70 grams of protein a day, right? So maybe for a period of time, it would be worth considering. And I've actually started doing this the last couple of days, just because it's been so long since I've done it, gone, yeah, am I getting in enough protein? Am I really, like, just revisiting that and starting to measure out protein and just double check my levels and going down that path. So it's not like, but once you learn it, it does become easier. And I've just decided to revisit it for my own benefit, but also to help other people to just reconfirm that. Because I remember when my mum was unwell, she had brain tumor, and I was measuring out all her food because I put her on a ketogenic diet. And it is a real eye-opener to become more aware of what foods have protein in them, what foods don't, how much protein you're consuming with your meal. There's that line, though, for it to become obsessive, but particularly if you're measuring carbs, but you've got to still, I think measuring protein sometimes can be really beneficial for a week or 2 weeks to go, am I getting in enough? And then that brings me to another point. Am I getting in enough food? Like, if I'm intermittent fasting, am I getting in enough nutrient dense food in that window? Am I getting in enough food? Am I getting in enough plants? Have I got enough fiber to keep, because fiber will also slow the release of glucose. Am I getting in enough water? Because sometimes cravings can be is actually mistaken, and it's dehydration. And just so you know, water is much better off sipped continuously than sculling a thing of water or a bottle of water as you throughout the day. You will absorb water better if you sip throughout the day. So there's a lot of aspects to the biochemical, and they all need to be addressed. It's like looking at your diet. Are you getting in enough? Do you know where your protein's coming from? Is your plate the way that you're planning your meal the right balance? But then also, are you insulin resistant? Do you have nutritional deficiencies? Is this impacting your craving? Magnesium being one of the big ones that can really impact cravings. Women, particularly before their period, you know, if you crave chocolate, it could be a magnesium thing. You might want to up your magnesium intake. For everyone that comes across me, I give everyone magnesium, just so you know, because most people, I'd say 90% of the population are deficient in magnesium because of our levels, the way we live our life, the way we're stressed, the way we absorb our food, all of that. So then we move on to the psychological and emotional part. And like I was saying before, there's so many weavings and so many layers with emotional eating. I come across a lot of people, and I go through this as well. And I've been through this a lot with emotional eating, procrastinating eating. And sometimes emotional eating, for the most part, it's if you're choosing food over feeling your feelings, you're procrastinating from feeling. You're trying to avoid pain and make yourself feel better rather than just sitting in the uncomfortableness. Or you're procrastinating because you don't want to do something, and there's a discomfort that you're trying to avoid. There's also an emotional eating component of if you're not feeling good about yourself. I've had clients where we've figured out that they were also rewarded through food as a kid. So when they're feeling not loved or not connected, they'll go and use food as that way to feel connected, because that's how they were rewarded. That's how food was connected to them as a kid. And that's how they bring that into their world. And so it's looking at that behavior and then going, how else can we help you feel connected? How can we help you feel loved? How can you give that to yourself without having to use something external to fill that void, and just use that as a tool rather than using the externals as a tool, if that makes sense. You know, we get a dopamine hit from food. There is a dopamine hit. We eat food. There's this high that you can get from eating certain foods, and it's addictive. The dopamine is addictive. And having this ability to regulate your nervous system, to be able to calm your farm, so to speak, to calm your whole, like not be in constant fight or flight and be in more parasympathetic, is really important. One thing I really use with my clients now is teaching them to use their voice in a way to switch on that vagal nerve stimulation from the stomach to the brain, because that puts us into rest and digest, particularly before you're eating. So taking big, deep breaths in, doing a couple of deep breaths out, really powerful. So just do it now if you're watching, like, let it go. Breathe in. And then another, once you've felt that calm down, like three of those. Now doing the outward sigh is really powerful, and making some sort of sigh. I find this even when you say, for example, if you're in a yoga class and you let out if you've ever been in a yoga class and they've done that, it feels good, and it switches, it calms you down. And part of that is the sighing and the the activation that happens with that, because you wouldn't make that sort of sigh or that relaxation if you were in a stressed state. So it's telling your brain that you're safe. Asking yourself questions, like better quality questions, being able to stop yourself in the moment and go, okay, am I really hungry, or am I trying to distract myself? What am I trying to distract myself? Can I actually sit with this and feel my feelings? It's okay to feel feelings. I'm safe in this moment to sit with that and create a container for yourself. And that takes a practice, and that often takes some guidance to help, people through that. But being able to actually sit there and sit with it. And this is the power, I think, of any internal work where you're constantly sitting in silence and going inward, because you have that power to just become the observer, and you have that power to feel your feelings. Meditation, inner child work, these types of practices to sit, and journaling as well, to feel your feelings, to be there, not be distracted, not have the outside externals. That silence is really important. And asking yourself, what am I trying to distract myself? How am I feeling? Why is that coming up right now? Like, just giving yourself the space to do that. And it might only take 5-10 minutes, but it can be a game changer if you're going throughout your whole day. And I've done this a lot. And then I'm like, why? I just need to sit and feel my freaking feelings for 10 minutes and then let myself be in it. And then I can move through it. Asking yourself the question, am I thirsty? So going back to the actual biochemical part, am I thirsty? Do I need water? If you are hungry, okay, what's going to be the most nourishing thing for me right now? If I choose to eat something, can I eat something that's got some protein in it? That's a good question. It's going to keep me a bit fuller. If I'm hungry, what does my body need? Which is what I just talked about. How can I nourish myself in this moment? Now, the trick is going back to the blood sugar levels. If you've got unregulated blood sugar levels, you're not going to get to this question, because you're like, I need to eat something. I need to eat something now. And so sometimes having more, like making sure you're getting in enough protein, making sure your meals you're eating are adequate enough so you go get to that point. I remember the other day I was down in Manly actually, and I had been working, and I was like, I really want to go to this really awesome health food cafe. I haven't been there in ages, and I was like, I'm just going to go and get a salad from there, because I know how awesome it is. I'm going to go, and then I'm going to sit on the beach and eat it. And I intended to ride my bike down, and then I just got busy, and I hadn't stopped yet, and it got to like 3:30, and I was like, all right, I've got to go down there. I went down there, they'd shut, and I was devastated. It was a Monday too, so I don't even know if they were open. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I going to eat? And I went to another smoothie juice place, and I was so hungry that I bought a smoothie, which was organic and blah, blah, blah. And then I looked at the sugar content, and I was like, and I'd already consumed it because I was starving. And that hasn't happened to me in a really long time. So it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And I went, okay, that was a lesson for me. Need to make sure that I'm going to stop for an adequate break and eat the right food, because then you do make wrong decisions, which is sort of what inspired this video. So it can happen to the best of us, right? We're all human. I'm human. I go through all the same stuff you do. It's just going, okay, well then, am I making sure that I'm getting in enough and eating the right quality type of food so that doesn't happen? And I'm very conscious of it now that it's not going to happen. I'm actually up to my protein intake a little bit, going, yeah, I think I need a bit more protein, because that's why I'm getting to that point, and also making sure that I am eating earlier. Asking yourself, and the other thing is making sure that you've got food in the house, that there's lots of healthy options, that you're organized. Organization is key. The other thing is asking yourself, when we're talking about emotional eatings, what's the pain I'm trying to avoid, or the void I'm trying to fill? I love this question. When you're ever trying to distract yourself, whether it be food, whether it be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be sex, whatever. It can be weed and alcohol. It's a big one for a lot of people. But what am I trying to What am I trying to avoid, numb out from, you know, distract myself from? And the other part, and I did this little video this morning on Instagram, was thinking about when we want to change, you know, like we have these goals and these good intentions, and sometimes life just gets busy and gets in the way. So making sure that you've got good food and good backup plans, and you're really aware of what options are. But the resistance and making mistakes and having lessons is not a bad thing. Like when we're starting to move and we want to make change, having resistance, like I had these resistance bands, and having resistance bands is really powerful, was a powerful metaphor for me, going, yeah, I can see that, like, if I didn't have the resistance, we can't create the muscle and the strength and move through it and build the strength upon that. We need the resistance. We need it. We need it in our lives. And so this is the same with, we need the resistance. If we're trying to change our diet, if we're trying to lose weight, if we're trying to get more fit, think about training, if we're trying to learn a new skill, there's always going to be resistance. And if you can just allow, like, be okay with that, you stop resisting the resistance. Know that it's going to be challenging, and there's going to be times when you've got to get off sugar, or you're craving foods and you've got to change your diet, and you might have these goals, or you've got to look after yourself better and you've got these goals, but you're going to come up against resistance. It's not going to always be easy. That's not how it works. And so if we understand there's always that resistance, we pull out the band and it wants to go back, and we pull out the band and it wants to go back, and we pull out the band and it wants to go back, and eventually we get stronger. But, you know, there is always a swing, or you think about an elastic band, like there is always this resistance, and we can let go of the resistance and we're going to swing back the other way as well. So we've got to build that muscle, and we create that resistance, or the resistance will flick us back in the face. You know, like the energy from that resistance, because we're resisting it too much and then we let go. Can we actually just hold in that resistance and then build the strength from that? And I thought that was just such a good metaphor for any challenges that we're going through. And I think cravings is one of them, to being able to sit in the discomfort and not always just try and move it and shift it, and just be okay with being a little bit hungry and then making a wise choice, or being okay with and just being able to sit with it and get to that point and know that as long as you address these things that aren't driving you, so you're possessed, you can get to that point and then start to move through that. But you've got to also make sure, what I talked about before, is addressing these things that are also driving us, so we feel like we don't have control, and just bringing more consciousness into why we've got the cravings and why we're feeling this way. And there's this hormonal imbalance that also needs to be addressed first. So little baby steps as we go along is what builds the muscle. It's the momentum, the actions every day that creates the momentum that then creates the change. And that's the same with this, and shifting cravings and moving cravings. And a lot of what we're craving can tell us a lot about what's going on in our body. So I hope you found that helpful. If you've got any questions, please comment below and I will get back to you. Or please also invite other people to this group that need this information. I would be very, here's my weed. I'd be very grateful, very, more than grateful for you to share this information with people, because I know a lot of people need this information. And I will see you all soon. Have a beautiful night. Ciao.